John Smith gripped his seat tightly as the lunar lander shook violently. Red warning lights flashed across the control panel, and alarms blared in his ears. This was not how his mission was supposed to go. Just minutes ago, everything had been perfect. After years of training and months of space travel, John was about to become one of the few humans to set foot on the moon. His heart had been racing with excitement as the lander detached from the main spacecraft and began its descent. But now, that excitement had turned to fear. Mission Control, this is Lunar Lander Alpha. We have multiple system failures. I'm losing control, John shouted into his radio. Static was his only reply. The communication system must have failed too. John's mind raced as he tried to remember his emergency training. He flipped switches and pressed buttons, desperately trying to stabilize the craft. But nothing worked. The moon's gray, cratered surface was getting closer by the second. Come on, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead inside his helmet. With a sickening lurch, the lander tilted to one side. John's stomach dropped as he realized what was about to happen. He was going to crash. In the last few seconds before impact, John closed his eyes and braced himself. The lander hit the moon's surface with a tremendous bang. Metal screamed as it bent and tore. John was thrown against his harness, pain exploding through his body. Then, everything went black. When John opened his eyes, he wasn't sure how much time had passed. His head throbbed, and every part of his body ached. The inside of the lander was dark, lit only by a few flickering emergency lights. He tried to move and gasped in pain. Something was definitely broken, maybe several somethings. But he was alive, and that was more than he had expected. Slowly, carefully, John undid his harness and tried to assess the situation. The lander was tilted at an odd angle, and sparks occasionally flew from damaged panels. The air felt thin. His oxygen system must be damaged. Gotta get out, John mumbled to himself. With trembling hands, he checked his spacesuit. It seemed intact, but he knew it only had a limited air supply. It took all of John's remaining strength to force open the lander's hatch. As it creaked open, he got his first clear view of the lunar landscape. Endless gray stretched in all directions, broken only by craters and distant mountains. The earth hung in the black sky, a beautiful blue marble that now seemed impossibly far away. Under different circumstances, John would have been awestruck. Now, he felt only a deep, crushing loneliness. He climbed out of the lander, wincing with every movement. His left leg nearly buckled as he put weight on it, and he had to lean against the damaged craft to stay upright. "Okay, John," he said to himself, his voice sounding strange in the vacuum of his suit. "You're an astronaut. You've trained for this. Think." But as he looked around at the barren lunar landscape, John realized the harsh truth. His lander was destroyed. His communication systems were down. He had no way to call for help and limited oxygen. He was stranded on the moon, injured and alone. John felt panic rising in his chest. He forced himself to take deep breaths, trying to stay calm. Panicking would only use up his precious oxygen faster. "One step at a time," he muttered. "Check supplies. Look for anything useful in the wreckage. Maybe there's still a chance." As John limped around the crash site, searching for anything that might help him survive, he didn't notice a flicker of movement in a nearby crater. He didn't see the strange, silvery figure that rose slightly above the crater's rim, watching him with inhuman eyes. John Smith, one of Earth's bravest explorers, thought he was alone on this alien world. He was wrong. John Smith stumbled through the lunar landscape, each step a struggle against pain and exhaustion. His breath came in ragged gasps, fogging up his helmet. The oxygen gauge on his suit blinked an angry red, warning him that time was running out. "Just a little further," he panted, though he had no idea where he was going. The crash site was far behind him now, but every gray crater looked the same. He was hopelessly lost. Suddenly, John's injured leg gave out. He fell forward, hitting the dusty ground hard. Pain shot through his body, and for a moment he lay there, fighting the urge to close his eyes and give up. That's when he saw it. At first, John thought his mind was playing tricks on him. A shimmering, silvery figure stood at the edge of a nearby crater. It was roughly humanoid, but taller and thinner than any person John had ever seen. Its skin seemed to reflect the starlight, and its large, almond-shaped eyes glowed with an eerie blue light. John blinked hard, certain the figure would disappear, but when he opened his eyes, it was still there, and it was moving towards him. Fear gripped John's heart. He tried to stand, to run, but his body wouldn't respond. He could only watch as the alien approached. The creature stopped a few feet away from John. It tilted its head, studying him with those strange, glowing eyes. John held his breath, waiting for he didn't know what. Then, to his amazement, the alien extended a long, slender hand. John hesitated. Every sci-fi movie he'd ever watched told him not to trust the strange alien. But as his oxygen alarm beeped insistently, he realized he had no choice. With a shaking hand, he reached out and grasped the alien's fingers. The alien's grip was surprisingly strong. It pulled John to his feet effortlessly, supporting his weight as if he were weightless in the low gravity. No words were exchanged. How could they be, through the vacuum of space? But somehow, John understood that the alien wanted him to follow. With no other options, he limped alongside his strange rescuer. They moved across the lunar surface much faster than John could have managed alone. The alien seemed to know exactly where it was going, weaving between craters with purpose. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they approached what looked like a large boulder. The alien pressed its hand against the rock's surface, and to John's astonishment, a hidden door slid open. Inside was a smooth, sloping tunnel leading down into the moon's interior. John hesitated at the entrance, his survival instincts warring with his desperate need for shelter and oxygen. The alien gently tugged on his arm, its eyes seeming to convey reassurance. Taking a deep breath, John stepped into the tunnel. The door slid shut behind them, and for a moment, John was plunged into darkness. Then soft blue lights flickered to life along the walls, illuminating a high-tech corridor that looked nothing like the rough cave John had expected. As they descended deeper into the moon, the tunnel opened up into a vast, domed chamber. John's jaw dropped in awe. The cavern was filled with strange, glowing structures that might have been buildings. More of the silvery aliens moved about, some turning to stare curiously at John. His alien guide led him to what looked like a medical bay. Other aliens approached, carrying devices John didn't recognize. He tensed, unsure of their intentions. The first alien, the one who had saved him, placed a hand on John's shoulder. Somehow, without words, John understood. "You're safe now. Let us help you." Exhausted, injured, and with no other choice, John nodded. He allowed the aliens to help him remove his damaged spacesuit. As soon as his helmet came off, he gasped, expecting to suffocate. Instead, he found the air was breathable, different from Earth's, but rich in oxygen. As the aliens began to treat his injuries with their advanced technology, John's mind raced with questions. Who were these beings? How long had they been here? And what would happen to him now? One thing was certain. His mission to the moon had taken a turn he could never have imagined. As he looked around at the alien city hidden beneath the lunar surface, John realized his adventure was only just beginning. John Smith sat on what seemed to be a bed, though it was unlike any he had seen on Earth. It was soft and seemed to adjust to his body, easing the pain from his injuries. The alien medical bay hummed with strange energy, and John watched in amazement as his wounds healed faster than he thought possible. The alien who had rescued him stood nearby, its silvery skin shimmering under the soft blue lights. John had been trying to communicate with it for hours, but so far, they had made little progress. He pointed to himself and said, "John, for what felt like the 100th time. The alien tilted its head, those large blue eyes blinking slowly. Then, to John's surprise, it made a sound, a soft, melodic trill that seemed to echo in John's mind. Zar-El, John repeated, trying to mimic the sound. The alien's eyes brightened, and it nodded. "Okay, Zar-El," John said, a smile spreading across his face. "We're getting somewhere." Over the next few days, John and Zar-El worked tirelessly to build a common language. They started with simple objects. John would point to something and say its name in English, and Zar-El would respond with the alien word. They drew pictures, used hand gestures, and slowly but surely began to understand each other. John learned that the aliens called themselves the Lunari, and they had been living on the moon for thousands of years. Their civilization had moved underground to escape the harsh surface conditions and to hide from Earth's prying eyes. As John's understanding grew, so did his amazement. The Lunari were far more advanced than humans in many ways. They had mastered gravity control, which explained how they moved so easily in the underground city. Their medical technology was beyond anything John had seen, and they had found ways to create sustainable ecosystems deep within the moon. But the Lunari were curious about humans too. Zar-El and the others asked John countless questions about Earth, its people, and their technology. They were particularly interested in human emotions and relationships, concepts that seemed new and fascinating to them. One day, Zar-El took John on a tour of the underground city. They walked through vast gardens where plants John had never seen before grew under artificial sunlight. They visited workshops where Lunari craftsmen created beautiful objects that seemed to defy the laws of physics. "How long have you been watching us?" John asked as they stood on a balcony overlooking the alien metropolis. Zar-El's response came in a mix of words and images that formed in John's mind, a new form of communication they had discovered. John saw flashes of human history, pyramids being built, great wars, the first moon landing. The Lunari had been silent witnesses to it all. "Why didn't you ever make contact?" John asked. Zar-El's answer was tinged with sadness. The Lunari had seen humanity's capacity for both great kindness and terrible destruction. They feared what might happen if their existence became known. John nodded, understanding their caution. But he also felt a great hope. If he could learn to communicate with the Lunari, maybe he could help bridge the gap between their two species. As the days passed, John found himself torn. He missed Earth and knew his fellow astronauts must be searching for him. But he was also fascinated by the Lunari and their world. He was learning so much, seeing things he never thought possible. One evening, as John sat with Zar-El watching the Earth rise over the lunar landscape through a transparent dome, he realized something important. He wasn't just an astronaut on a mission anymore. He had become an ambassador, the first human to truly know an alien race. "Zar-El," he said, turning to his alien friend, "I want to learn everything about your people, your history, your science, and I want to teach you about us, the good and the bad. Do you think that's possible?" Zar-El's eyes glowed warmly, and a sense of agreement and excitement flowed between them. As they sat there, human and alien, John felt he was on the brink of something monumental. Two worlds, separated by space and time, were about to change forever. The cultural exchange had only just begun, and the possibilities seemed as endless as the stars above. John Smith's eyes widened as he followed Zar-El through a hidden doorway. They had been exploring the Lunari city for weeks, but this was different. The air hummed with energy, and strange symbols glowed on the walls. "What is this place?" John asked, his voice filled with wonder. Zar-El's response came as a mix of words and images in John's mind. This was the Hall of Ancestors, a sacred place where the Lunari kept their most important secrets and powerful technologies. As they walked deeper into the hall, John felt like he was stepping into a dream. Holographic displays flickered to life around them, showing scenes from the Lunari's long history. John saw images of a distant planet, beautiful and strange, that he realized must be the Lunari's original home. "You're not from the moon," John said, understanding dawning on him. Zar-El confirmed his suspicion. The Lunari had come to the moon thousands of years ago, fleeing a dying world. They had chosen Earth's satellite as their new home, hidden from the young human civilization. John's mind reeled with questions. But how did you build all this? How do you survive here? In answer, Zar-El led him to a large, pulsing crystal at the center of the hall. It glowed with an inner light, and John could feel warmth radiating from it even through his suit. "This is the heart of Luma," Zar-El explained, using their mix of words and mental images. "It powers our entire civilization." John learned that the crystal was more than just an energy source. It was alive in a way he couldn't fully understand. It helped the Lunari transform the moon's barren interior into a livable environment, creating air, water, and even artificial gravity. As they continued their tour, John discovered more wonders. He saw machines that could manipulate matter at the atomic level, creating any material the Lunari needed. He witnessed medical pods that could heal almost any injury or illness. But the most astonishing revelation came when Zar-El showed him a room filled with swirling, colorful portals. "Are these what I think they are?" John asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zar-El nodded. The Lunari had mastered limited forms of teleportation and even time viewing. They could open windows to watch events on Earth or other parts of the moon without being detected. John's excitement was tempered by a growing unease. The Lunari's technology was incredible, but also potentially dangerous if misused. "Does everyone in your society have access to this?" Zar-El assured him that these technologies were carefully controlled. Only a select few Lunari were allowed to use them, and there were strict rules about interfering with Earth or changing past events. As they left the Hall of Ancestors, John's mind was buzzing with all he had learned. The moon, which humans had thought was a lifeless rock, was teeming with secrets and marvels beyond imagination. But one question nagged at him. "Zar-El," he said, stopping in front of a window that looked out over the underground city. "Why are you showing me all this? I'm honored, but I'm just one human. Why trust me with your secrets?" Zar-El's eyes seemed to glow brighter as it answered. The Lunari had been watching humanity's progress for centuries. They had seen humans' capacity for both great good and terrible destruction. But they had also seen the potential for growth, for learning, for reaching beyond their own world. John, Zar-El explained, represented that potential. His curiosity, his willingness to understand rather than fear the unknown, gave the Lunari hope. They believed that perhaps, through John, they could begin a new chapter in their relationship with Earth. As John absorbed this, he felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just an astronaut, or even an ambassador. He was a bridge between two worlds, carrying knowledge that could change the course of human history. "What happens now?" John asked, looking out at the bustling Lunari city. Zar-El's response was both exciting and terrifying. Now it was time for John to decide. Would he keep the Lunari's secrets, protecting their hidden civilization? Or would he reveal the truth to Earth, potentially changing both worlds forever? As John pondered this monumental choice, he realized that his greatest adventure was only just beginning. The secrets of the moon were now his to bear, and the future of two civilizations might rest on his decision. John Smith stood in the Lunari's observation chamber, his heart pounding. On the large holographic display before him, he could see a spacecraft approaching the moon. It was the rescue mission from Earth, coming to find him. "They're here," John said, his voice a mix of relief and anxiety. Zar-El stood beside him, its silvery form reflecting the light from the display. The alien's large eyes blinked slowly as it watched the approaching ship. "What will you do?" Zar-El asked, using their shared mental link. John ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of his decision more than ever. For weeks, he had lived among the Lunari, learning their ways and marveling at their advanced civilization. He had promised to keep their secrets, understanding their fear of how humans might react. But now, faced with returning to his own people, the choice seemed impossible. "I don't know," John admitted. "They'll ask questions. They'll want to know where I've been, how I survived." As if on cue, a voice crackled over the communication system. The Lunari had allowed John to receive transmissions from Earth, though they carefully monitored them. "Lunar Lander Alpha, this is Rescue Team Charlie. Do you copy? John, if you can hear us, we're approaching your last known coordinates." John's throat tightened. He recognized the voice. It was his friend and fellow astronaut, Sarah Chen. Zar-El placed a comforting hand on John's shoulder. "You must decide," the alien said gently. "But know that whatever you choose, you will always have a place among us." John nodded, grateful for his alien friend's support. He took a deep breath and pressed the communication button. "Rescue Team Charlie, this is John Smith. I copy you. I'm alive." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then an eruption of cheers came through the speaker. "John, thank God." Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. "We thought we'd lost you. What happened? Where are you?" John hesitated, looking at Zar-El. The alien nodded encouragingly. It's a long story, Sarah," John said carefully. "I'm safe, but things aren't exactly what we thought they were up here." There was a pause. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was cautious. "What do you mean, John?" John closed his eyes, making his decision. "I can't explain everything over the radio. When you land, I'll meet you. But I won't be alone." The silence that followed was deafening. "John," Sarah said slowly, "are you saying what I think you're saying?" "Yes," John replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "We're not alone on the moon. And I think it's time for Earth to know the truth." The radio exploded with questions and exclamations. John could hear other voices in the background, presumably mission control patching in. Zar-El stepped closer to the communication panel. "Perhaps," the alien suggested, "it would be best if I spoke to them as well." John nodded, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through him. "Everyone," he said into the radio, silencing the chatter. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." As Zar-El introduced itself to the stunned humans on the other end of the line, John felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. He knew the road ahead would be challenging. There would be fear, mistrust, and countless obstacles to overcome. But he also felt hope. This was a chance for humanity to grow, to learn, to become part of something greater than themselves. And John was at the center of it all. As the rescue ship prepared to land and the Lunari made preparations to reveal themselves, John thought about the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. He had come to the moon expecting to find barren rock, and instead discovered a new civilization, new friends, and a new purpose. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: the relationship between Earth and the moon would never be the same again. And John Smith, the astronaut who crashed on the lunar surface, would go down in history not just as an explorer, but as the man who introduced humanity to its first alien neighbors. The future was uncertain, but as John looked at Zar-El and then back at the image of the approaching Earth ship, he knew it would be an adventure unlike any other. The air in the Lunari meeting chamber was thick with tension. John Smith sat at a large crystalline table, flanked by Zar-El and other Lunari leaders. Across from them sat Sarah Chen and the rest of the rescue team, their eyes wide with a mix of wonder and apprehension. "So," Sarah said, breaking the silence, "you've been here all this time, living with them." She gestured towards the Lunari, still seeming unsure if she was dreaming. John nodded. "Yes, the Lunari saved my life, Sarah. They've shown me incredible things that could change everything back on Earth." One of the other astronauts, a man named Mike, leaned forward. "But why didn't they reveal themselves before?" Why hide for so long? Zar-El's mental voice echoed in John's mind, and he translated for the group. The Lunari have watched humanity for centuries. They've seen our wars, our destruction. They feared what might happen if their existence became known. Sarah's brow furrowed. And now, what's changed? John took a deep breath. Me. Us. This moment. The Lunari believe it's time for our two species to meet, to learn from each other. The room erupted into discussion. Some of the astronauts were excited about the possibilities, while others voiced concerns about security and the potential dangers of alien contact. As the debate raged, John felt torn. He understood both sides. He had lived among the Lunari, seen their peaceful nature and advanced technology. But he also knew how Earth might react, with fear, with greed, possibly even with violence. What about the governments back home? Mike asked. They're going to want to know everything. They'll want access to this technology. John saw the Lunari leaders exchange worried glances. He knew they feared exactly this, that humans would try to take their technology, maybe even invade their home. We can't just hand everything over, John said firmly. The Lunari have rights. This is their home. We need to approach this carefully, diplomatically. Sarah looked at him skeptically. John, do you really think Earth's leaders will see it that way? This is the discovery of the century. Every nation will want a piece of it. The weight of the situation pressed down on John. He had dreamed of being an explorer, of making great discoveries. But now, faced with the reality, he realized the enormous responsibility he carried. Zar-El spoke up, its mental voice calm but firm. We wish for peace and mutual understanding, but we will defend our home if necessary. The implied threat hung in the air, making everyone shift uncomfortably. John stood up, looking around the room. Listen, all of you. We have a chance here to do something incredible, to bridge the gap between two worlds. But if we mess this up, if we let fear or greed drive our actions, we could start an interplanetary war. He turned to his fellow astronauts. We need to be the voice of reason here. When we return to Earth, we need to make them understand the delicacy of this situation. Then he addressed the Lunari. And you need to be prepared to open up more. Isolation isn't the answer anymore. We need to find a middle ground. For a long moment, silence reigned in the chamber. Then, slowly, heads began to nod on both sides of the table. Sarah stood up and extended her hand towards Zar-El. On behalf of Earth, I'd like to say, we come in peace. We have a lot to learn from each other. Zar-El, understanding the human gesture, reached out and shook Sarah's hand. The touch seemed to break the tension in the room, and soon humans and Lunari were mingling, talking excitedly about the future. But as John watched, he knew this was just the beginning. The real challenges lay ahead when they returned to Earth and the news of the Lunari's existence spread across the globe. He caught Zar-El's eye across the room. The alien nodded, a gesture of trust and friendship that moved John deeply. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As the impromptu reception continued, John's mind raced with plans. They needed to prepare carefully for the return to Earth, to craft their message just right. The future of two worlds depended on what happened next. The moral conflict was far from resolved, but John felt a glimmer of hope. If they could make this small group understand and cooperate, maybe, just maybe, they could do the same for the rest of humanity. The Earth hung like a blue marble in the vast blackness of space, growing larger as the spacecraft approached. John Smith stood at the viewport, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Beside him, Zar-El watched the planet with curious, glowing eyes. It's beautiful, the alien said through their mental link. John nodded. Yes, it is. And it's about to change forever. The past week had been a whirlwind of preparation. After the initial meeting between the Lunari and the rescue team, both sides had worked tirelessly to create a plan for first contact. Now, as they returned to Earth, John knew they were about to make history. The spacecraft's communication system crackled to life. Lunar mission, this is Houston. You are cleared for landing. Welcome home. Sarah Chen, sitting at the controls, took a deep breath. This is it, she said, looking back at John and Zar-El. Are you ready? John reached out and placed a hand on Zar-El's shoulder. As ready as we'll ever be. As the spacecraft began its descent, John's mind raced through the plan they had crafted. They would land at a secure facility where top government and scientific leaders from around the world had gathered. John, along with Sarah and the rescue team, would make the initial announcement. Then, in a moment that would be broadcast globally, Zar-El would step forward as the representative of the Lunari. The landing was smooth, but John's nerves were anything but calm. As the spacecraft's door opened, he took a deep breath of Earth air for the first time in months. A crowd had gathered, scientists, government officials, and a select group of journalists. Their eager faces turned to shock as John emerged, followed by his team, and then, to their utter amazement, Zar-El. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. John stepped up to the microphone that had been set up. People of Earth, he began, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. I stand before you today, not just as an astronaut returning from a mission, but as a messenger of a truth that will change our world forever. We are not alone in the universe. In fact, we are not even alone on our own moon. He gestured to Zar-El, who stepped forward. This is Zar-El, a representative of the Lunari, an advanced civilization that has lived beneath the surface of the moon for thousands of years. The crowd erupted in a mix of excitement, disbelief, and fear. John raised his hands, calling for calm. I know this is a lot to take in, but I've lived among the Lunari. I've seen their world, their technology, their peaceful way of life. They have much to teach us, and we have much to offer them in return. This is not a moment for fear, but for hope, for a new chapter in human history. Zar-El stepped up to the microphone. Using the communication technology they had developed, the aliens' thoughts were translated into words that echoed across the facility and to the billions watching around the world. People of Earth, Zar-El said, its mental voice calm and reassuring. We come in peace and friendship. For too long, we have watched from afar. Now, we wish to stand beside you as allies and partners in exploring the cosmos. What followed was a flurry of questions, explanations, and discussions that lasted long into the night. John found himself at the center of it all, translating, explaining, and mediating between the Lunari and Earth's leaders. As dawn broke the next day, John stood outside the facility, watching the sun rise over his home planet. Zar-El joined him, its silvery form glinting in the early morning light. What happens now? The alien asked. John smiled. Now we build bridges. Between our worlds, our cultures, our sciences. It won't be easy. There will be challenges, misunderstandings, maybe even conflicts. But together, we can overcome them. He looked up at the moon, barely visible in the brightening sky. You know, humans have always dreamed of what we might find out there in space, but we never imagined that our greatest discovery would be right in our own backyard. Zar-El nodded, and we never imagined that our long isolation would end with such hope. As they stood there, human and alien side by side, John felt a profound sense of optimism. The road ahead would be long and sometimes difficult, but it was filled with incredible possibilities. Two civilizations, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, were about to embark on a journey together. The horizon before them was new, uncharted, and full of promise. And John Smith, the astronaut who had crashed on the moon and changed the course of human history, was ready to take the first step into that bright future.